Okay, let's dive in. So picture this scene, right? Soldiers, totally exhausted, marching, desperate for water.
Yeah.
And their leader, he knows they're about to just give up. He shouts, "Hey, look, up ahead, a huge forest of plums, sweet, juicy plums."
Ah, the cow story. Classic.
Exactly. And like instantly you can imagine them perking up. Maybe their mouths even start watering a bit.
Definitely. A physical reaction.
Their spirits lift. They start moving faster, all from just a few words. It's kind of like magic the power language has.
It really is pretty unique. I mean, other animals communicate, sure, but nothing like human language. Its power to create abstract ideas, build bonds, organize societies. It's fundamental.
It's everything, really. But, how much do we actually understand about where it comes from? I think most people figure, well, it's a skill you learn.
Right, like riding a bike or something.
Yeah, you pick it up. Maybe better education means better language, that sort of thing.
That's the standard view, isn't it? That we're born with this general ability to learn, and language is just something we soak up from culture, from being taught.
But, okay, here's the thing that makes you go, little kids, like toddlers. Before any formal schooling, they just absorb spoken language effortlessly.
It's incredible.
Grammar, pronunciation, meaning. It just happens. And it feels way too complex for them to just be mimicking, or for parents to be explicitly teaching every single rule. It feels like there's got to be something else going on.
Something deeper. And that's precisely what we're digging into today, looking at the source material you shared, especially the ideas from Steven Pinker's book, The Language Instinct.
Pinker. Yeah, he's great at explaining this complex stuff. That book, back in '94, it really shook things up, didn't it?
It did. His core argument was pretty revolutionary then. Language isn't just something we learn like a cultural invention. It's an instinct.
An instinct, like hardwired.
Kind of like how we're wired for vision or to walk. A biological blueprint for language. That's the idea.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. We're going to unpack that using the source material. We'll hit, 3 main areas?
Sounds right. First, what's the evidence that language really is an instinct? Second, does the language you speak actually shape how you think? The whole Horphian thing.
Right. And third, how on earth do kids learn it so easily? That childhood genius thing.
Exactly. So let's tackle that first one. Why argue it's an instinct? It feels learned, doesn't it?
Totally. I mean, instinct sounds like birds migrating, not complex grammar. The usual idea is you're born smart, you learn stuff, language is one of those things.
But Pinker, and the source material backs this up, argues the evidence really points another way. One huge piece is just language is everywhere, and it's incredibly complex everywhere.
Universality, you mean? Like every human group has language.
Every single one discovered. We're talking maybe 5,000 to 7,000 languages out there. And crucially, the source stresses this, the complexity isn't wildly different.
Wait, what? You mean a language from a small tribe with no writing is basically as complex grammatically as, say, English or French?
That's what the linguistic analysis shows. The underlying structures, the rules for forming sentences, expressing tense, asking questions, they're all sophisticated. It doesn't seem to matter if it's a technologically advanced society or a hunter-gatherer group.
Huh. If it was just cultural learning, you'd expect huge differences in complexity based on, how long they've had writing or schools, right?
You would think so.
Yeah.
But the fundamental capacity for complex grammar seems universal. That really challenges the idea that it's purely a product of cultural development.
Okay, that's a strong point. And you mentioned complexity examples.
Yeah, the source gives some good ones. Like, English seems simple to us, but we have something like 16 different tenses to signal really fine details about time.
16? I probably can't even name them all.
Huh? Most people can't. Or think about Cherokee. Its pronouns don't just have we. They have specific words for me and you, me and someone else, me and a bunch of other people.
Wow. A different we depending on who's included. That's intricate.
It really is. Linguists looking at these systems are just, amazed. And the source mentions William LeBeau's work showing this deep linguistic ability isn't tied to social class or education. You find complex language use everywhere.
So the basic capacity is there, regardless of environment. That's evidence point 1. Universal, deep complexity. What's next?
How kids actually develop language, especially in situations where the language they hear isn't complete. It gets at that old question, where does the complexity come from?
Yeah, the source had those amazing examples, the pidgin language one.
Right, Hawaii, 19th century. Sugar plantations.
Yeah.
Workers came from all over speaking different languages. To just get by, they developed a really basic pidgin.
Like simplified talk.
Very simplified. Borrowed words, no real grammar. Maybe me buy coffee or work or go home. Super basic, not a full language.
Okay.
But then their children, the kids who grew up hearing only this simple pidgin,
Hmm.
they didn't just copy it. They spontaneously created a brand new, fully complex language, a Creole.
Whoa. Wait, they invented grammar?
Pretty much. Hawaiian Creole. It has proper tenses, consistent word order, all the grammatical machinery their parents' pidgin lacked. The kids imposed structure onto the simple input.
That's incredible. They weren't just learning, they were building.
Exactly. And there's the Nicaraguan Sign Language story, too. Just as powerful.
Right, the School for the Deaf in 79.
Yeah. They tried teaching lip-reading Spanish, didn't work. The kids started using their own home signs with each other. At first, it was pretty basic, like a pidgin sign.
Okay.
But then, as more deaf kids came together, they elaborated on it. Younger kids learned the simple system and then expanded it. Over just a few years, they developed a complete standardized sign language. Nicaraguan Sign Language.
Yeah.
Complex grammar, syntax, the works. All created by the children themselves.
Wow. So in both cases, kids took limited, maybe even broken input, and their brains just built a proper language out of it.
It strongly suggests they have some kind of innate template or ability to structure language, to find or impose grammar. It's hard to explain otherwise. They weren't just imitating.
Okay, that feels like really solid evidence for an innate capacity. So, universal complexity, kids creating language. What's the third pillar?
The biological basis. If it's an instinct, it should have roots in our biology, our genes, our brains.
Makes sense.
And the source points to evidence like specific language impairment, or SLI.
What's that?
It's a condition, seems to have a genetic component, where kids struggle specifically with learning language, grammar, pronunciation, complex sentences. But their other cognitive abilities, like nonverbal intelligence, can be totally normal.
So it's not just about being generally slow, it's language specific.
Exactly. The source mentions a UK family where SLI was really common across generations,
Yeah.
suggesting it's inherited. It implies there's a distinct genetic factor related to language ability.
Okay, a specific vulnerability in the language system.
Yeah. And then you have evidence from brain damage, like Broca's aphasia.
From strokes, often.
Often, yeah. Damage to a specific spot in the left frontal lobe. And people with it often have trouble with grammar, with putting sentences together correctly or understanding complex structures, even if they can still understand individual words.
Like that example in the source.
Yeah.
Hearing, the alligator was killed by the hippopotamus.
Right. And then having trouble answering who died. Because figuring that out depends on analyzing the sentence structure, the grammar, the very thing that's impaired by the damage to Broca's area.
Even if they know perfectly well that hippos are usually bigger or whatever.
Exactly. Their world knowledge might be fine, but the specific language processing mechanism is broken. So these things, the genetic condition, the specific effects of localized brain damage, they really bolster the idea that language relies on distinct biological systems.
Okay, let's recap section 1 then. We've got language being universally complex, regardless of culture. We've got kids spontaneously creating grammatical systems from scratch. And we've got biological links through genetics and specific brain areas. That does build a strong case for it being more than just learned, an instinct.
It really does shift how you think about it. Okay, so now for the second big question. Does the language we speak actually control how we think?
Ah, the 1984 idea, newspeak.
That's the extreme version, yeah. The idea, sometimes called the Horphian hypothesis, that your language basically puts your thoughts in a box. Different language, different box, different thoughts.
Orwell's newspeak was designed to make rebellious thoughts impossible by just deleting the words for things like freedom or justice.
Exactly. The fictional inventors believed if you don't have the word, you can't have the thought. A pretty chilling idea.
And some real linguists have argued for a version of this, right? Pointing to differences between languages, like colors.
Yeah, that's a common example the source brings up. Languages carve up the color spectrum differently. English has, 11 basic color terms? Some languages have way fewer, like the Samani with maybe only 3.
3?
And some languages lump colors together that English separates, like blue and green in some. Or they make distinctions we don't routinely make, like Russian having separate basic words for light blue and dark blue.
So the question is, does a Russian speaker see blue differently? Or someone whose language uses one word for blue and green?
That's the crux of it. But the counter-argument which the source leans towards is probably not. Our eyes are built the same way. We all perceive the same physical spectrum of light.
It's just how we label the sections.
Pretty much. Language gives us categories and labels, which are useful, sure, but it doesn't seem to fundamentally change our perception or prevent us from thinking about distinctions, even if our language doesn't have a single word for it. We could easily talk about light blue or dark blue in English.
So language influences, maybe, but doesn't dictate thought.
That seems more likely.
Yeah.
And there's good evidence that we think in ways that aren't linguistic at all.
Like those baby experiments.
Yeah, Karen Wynn's work. Pre-verbal infants seem surprised when simple arithmetic doesn't work out, like 1 + 1 = 1 behind a screen. They look longer. It suggests they have some basic number sense, some expectations about quantity, before they have words for numbers.
Math without words. Amazing.
And it's not just babies. The source mentions vervet monkeys. They seem to understand kinship. If you play a recording of a specific baby monkey's distress call, the other monkeys will often look at that baby's mother.
They know who belongs to who.
Without needing words for mother or offspring. They grasp the social relationship. And think about how we think. Is it always in neat sentences?
Not really. Sometimes it's images, right?
Yeah.
Or just a feeling or...
Exactly. Lots of scientists, artists, thinkers report thinking visually or spatially. Faraday visualizing magnetic fields, Kekulé dreaming of snakes biting tails to get the structure of benzene. Those weren't word-based thoughts.
So thinking is definitely broader than just language. There has to be something else happening under the hood.
Which brings us to Pinker's concept of mentalese, the language of thought.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if we can think in words and images and spatial layouts, how does the brain put it all together? How does it perform logical operations? The idea is there might be a deeper underlying representational system, an internal code.
Like a universal mental language.
Sort of. A system of symbols and rules that represents concepts and logic, independent of any spoken language like English or Japanese. The brain translates sensory input and spoken language into mentalese for processing, then translates the results back out into speech or action.
And this mentalese would need to be really precise, right? Not fuzzy like our everyday language.
Absolutely. That's why English, or any natural language, probably isn't mentalese. Our languages are full of ambiguity. A bank can be a riverbank or a place for money. They have core friends Mary, she, my friend, can all point to the same person. Synonyms Sam ate the apple and the apple was eaten by Sam mean the same thing but are structured differently.
Yeah, that would be a terrible system for logical thought. Too confusing.
Right. So the flaws in our spoken languages actually argue against them being the medium of thought. Mentalese, this hypothetical internal system, is likely universal. Learning a language is basically learning how to translate between your internal mentalese and the specific sounds and rules of, say, French or Swahili.
Got it. So, summing up section 2, language doesn't trap our thoughts. We think non-linguistically, and our brains probably use a deeper universal mentalese that's separate from spoken words.
Precisely. Which leads us beautifully into the final section.
Yeah.
How do kids actually pull off learning their first language? This untaught genius.
Yeah, it really does seem like genius when you compare it to struggling through high school French.
It's remarkable. And it starts incredibly early, like before birth early.
Seriously. In the womb.
The source mentions studies where newborns just hours old showed a preference for the rhythms and melodies of their mother's language compared to a foreign one. French babies preferred French, Russian babies preferred Russian, even if the actual vowels and consonants were filtered out, leaving just the rhythm.
They're learning the tune before they're even born. That's wild.
And then as infants, they start out as universal listeners. They can perceive phonetic distinctions from all sorts of languages, even ones they've never been exposed to.
Like they can hear the difference between sounds that we as adults might struggle with if it's not in our language.
Exactly. But this amazing ability starts to narrow down around 10 months or so. They begin to focus in, specialize on the specific sounds that are meaningful in the language they hear every day. They start categorizing the soundscape around them.
And then the babbling starts.
Right around then, yeah. Before that, you get cooing around 3 months, playing with sounds at 5 months. Then around 7, 8 months, real syllables like ba-ba-ba. By about a year, they're babbling strings like dada, mama, gaga. And this isn't just random noise.
It's practice.
Crucial practice.
Yeah.
They're experimenting with their vocal tract, listening to themselves, figuring out how to make the sounds they hear. Around this time, they also start connecting sounds to meanings, understanding their first words.
And then comes the first actual word stage.
Usually around 1 year old, bol bol,
Yep.
more. Then, maybe 6 months later, around 18 months, the 2-word stage kicks in, mommy go, want juice.
Yeah.
This is also when vocabulary just explodes. They start learning new words incredibly fast.
And grammar starts emerging.
Yeah, simple grammar,
Hmm.
word order starts to matter. And then, between about 2.5 and 3.5, boom.
The language explosion.
Exactly. Sentences get longer, more complex. They start using grammatical markers, asking proper questions, using negatives. It's just this incredibly rapid development into fluent, grammatically sophisticated speech.
It's vital to remember, though, this is all spoken language we're talking about.
Absolutely crucial point the source makes. This seemingly automatic, innate unfolding happens for spoken or signed language. Reading and writing, totally different story.
That has to be taught explicitly.
Yes, literacy isn't innate. You need instruction, practice. That's why illiteracy exists where there's no schooling. You don't just absorb reading like you absorb talking.
So kids are wired to talk but need teaching to read.
Huh?
Okay, what role does the environment play in mastering spoken language then? It can't just be innate. They need input, right?
Oh, absolutely essential. The environment provides the data. Children need to hear language being used around them. The source mentions cases of severe neglect or isolation. While some specific feral child stories are debated, the principle holds. Without sufficient linguistic input during childhood, language development is severely hampered, maybe even impossible.
So you need the raw material. Does the way people talk to kids matter, like baby talk?
Motherese or parentese, yeah. That high-pitched, sing-songy, simplified way adults often talk to babies. Look at the pretty ball.
Does that actually help? Or is it just annoying?
It seems to help. The source suggests those exaggerated vowels make it easier for babies to distinguish sounds. And speaking slower, using simpler sentences, often pointing at objects while naming them, it helps them map words onto meanings.
Okay, so the input style can help. What about parents correcting mistakes? Like, don't say goed, say went.
Interestingly, the source points out that direct grammatical correction isn't actually that common and might not even be that effective. Parents usually understand what the kid means. You go park. And might just respond naturally using the correct form, oh, you went to the park.
So kids aren't just learning by being told they're wrong all the time.
It seems not. The source argues the child's brain is actively figuring out the rules from the positive evidence, the correct sentences they hear. They might overgeneralize a rule, like adding aid for all past tense, leading to goed or run.
Makes sense.
But as they hear went and ran more and more, and maybe don't hear adults saying good, their internal grammar system adjusts. It's like they're constantly forming hypotheses and refining them based on the input. It's an active construction process driven by that innate capacity.
Okay, which brings up two last things. If it's innate, why aren't we born talking? And why is it so much harder to learn a language later? The critical period idea.
Right. Good questions. Why not born talking? Well, human babies are born relatively underdeveloped compared to other animals, especially our brains.
Because the whole big head, small pelvis problem?
That's a big part of it, yeah. We have to be born before our heads get too big to make it out. So a lot of brain development happens after birth. The brain grows rapidly, connections explode. The source notes infants have way more synapses or neural connections than adults between 9 months and 2 years. The brain is also working much harder metabolically.
So the hardware needs time to develop.
Exactly. Language acquisition seems to kick into high gear once the brain hits a certain level of maturity during this intense growth phase.
And the critical period, why does it get harder?
The source suggests this peak language learning ability, this hyperplasticity, starts to decline around age 6 or so. It seems tied to brain maturation. As we get older, the brain's metabolic rate slows down, it prunes away many of those extra synapses, becoming more efficient and specialized, but also less flexible for easily absorbing the fundamental structures of a new language from scratch.
So the window of effortless acquisition closes, or at least narrows significantly.
That seems to be the case. The adult brain just isn't optimized for that kind of learning in the same way a young child's brain is. That's why picking up your first language feels automatic, while tackling a second one as an adult feels like, well, work.
Wow, okay, that covers a lot of ground. Let's try and pull the main threads together from this deep dive.
Sounds good. So first off, we saw compelling evidence challenging the language's just learned idea. Universality, complexity, kids creating language from pidgin, the biological links, it all points towards language as a human instinct.
Right. Then second, we looked at whether language dictates thought. The evidence suggests no, we think non-linguistically, and there's likely a deeper mentalese language of thought separate from spoken language.
And finally, we explored how kids actually do it, starting in the womb, progressing through stages, needing input but actively constructing grammar using innate mechanisms, all within a critical period tied to brain development.
It really does change how you see language. It's not just a tool we invented, it's part of our biology, something fundamental that unfolds within us.
A deep, inherent capacity.
Yeah. So maybe the next time you're just chatting or even just thinking to yourself, take a second to appreciate the incredible machinery working underneath. That huge difference between how easily you learned your first language and how tough a second one might feel. That's a clue to the powerful biological blueprint for language inside you, an instinct shaping how you connect and think, probably in ways you don't even realize.